You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jeanne Amlour, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jeanne Amlour International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact. Hello and welcome to another wonderful episode. We have an amazing guest, Kiara Bickers, who's a writer, systems thinker, and the author behind Bitcoin Clarity, the complete beginner's guide to understanding. Her book is the perfect companion for newcomers who want to understand Bitcoin as a system. Kiara's path into tech and Bitcoin was sparked by a fascination with Austrian economics and grew as she honed her skills as a developer. Today, she merges her engineering background with her passion for research communication at Blockstream, where she makes complex ideas at the cutting edge of cryptography accessible and engaging. Welcome, Kiara.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on.
It's a pleasure. So tell us a little bit about why you wrote your book and what it's about and what makes it important.
Sure, absolutely. So my book is broadly about Bitcoin, but more specifically, it's about understanding Bitcoin as a system. And okay, what do I mean by that? So I think the two primary ways that people think about Bitcoin is one, they think about it as like, economic digital gold, or they think about it as, this like technology and, this, I guess you would say, yeah, like some sort of like really deep technology. I worked with a lot of the cryptographers that contribute to Bitcoin. Obviously, the creator of Bitcoin is Satoshi, who is anonymous, but the people and the community who continue to maintain Bitcoin today are what are called cypherpunks. And yeah, when I started to get interested in Bitcoin because of this, it was like 2012. Ron Paul was talking about we need to audit the Fed, and I started looking into like what is the basis for money? How is money created? And I was quite young at the time, so I didn't really have much money to speak of. And I was talking to some of my friends who were going to university, and I was like, I really like to learn more about Bitcoin. Like, what do you think about this? And they were all engineers, so they'd be like, oh, well, you should just learn engineering. I spent quite a bit of time learning engineering, and I realized this didn't help me understand Bitcoin at all. So it's sort of a bit ironic in that way that you can learn about the technology, you could learn about coding and programming broadly, and that just like didn't help me understand Bitcoin at all. And working with the cryptographers, I saw the gap in what I would call like the marketplace of ideas, right? So people who understood Bitcoin as sound money, they didn't understand anything of the technology, which left them sort of vulnerable. And I can explain that. And then the people who understood the technology, I would say they didn't quite understand perhaps maybe like the economic ethos that was driving it. And you can see that in other cryptographies that are other cryptocurrencies that are created. So the reason why I wrote the book was to give people one place where they could learn about Bitcoin and see the beauty in it as cryptographers see it and truly understand the system without having to know how to code, without needing to be a cryptographer, just understand the principles that the cypherpunks understand and try to build in practice.
Okay, so you're saying there's two sides to Bitcoin. There's the economical, hey, I'm going to invest in Bitcoin. Then there's the whole architecture of it. Is that what you're saying? The two sides?
Yeah. Yeah. And like one mental model that comes up, and the book is broken down by mental models. It's like one mental model is like cryptography is not code, right? And it's like, okay, well, what does that mean? It's like when you're a coder, well, when you're like, when you have an idea that you can write out and prove in mathematics, once you go to implement that idea into code, there's now a huge gap in terms of the proof that you had written in math versus what actually is happening in the code. It's not as perfect or as beautiful, or there could be vulnerabilities in that. So there's a saying in crypto, like, don't roll your own crypto. There's a whole crypto community that, there's various mailing lists, and they kind of like battle it out for different proposals. And it's just it's an exciting world.
Okay, so I'm not very techie, and I've read a lot about crypto and the blockchain. What's the correlation between crypto and the blockchain?
That's actually the first chapter of the book. And the reason why I did that is because like the just the term blockchain in and of itself like doesn't really tell you anything. Like why are there blocks and why are there chain? I think the idea that really interests me, I enjoy studying history. was this idea of the evolution of accounting from single ledger accounting to double ledger accounting in kind of the Renaissance era. And you can look at Bitcoin as triple entry accounting, and I'll explain that. But basically, we have a ledger because with Bitcoin, you need to know, you need to put transactions in some order, right? So if you send money to me, we need to know that the funds were yours and that you sent them to me, and I'm not
Mm.
able to send them until I have received them, right? So transactions occur in some order as a way to facilitate the sending of funds. But what was unique and what some people have called triple entry accounting in Bitcoin is that you use double entry accounting when you're trying to balance books in a business, but in Bitcoin you actually send the funds
Hmm.
over the system of account, right? You're actually sending them over the ledger. And the reason now that's sort of the economic historic side that I frame out in the book, and then the technical side is like, why are there blocks? And one thing that's interesting is it takes time to send data across
Mm.
the world. Like anyone who's ever played video games or something sort of knows this, especially places like Australia. There can be a lot of latency. So if there's a transaction coming out of Australia and there's a transaction coming out of the U.S., but there's no central place that is timestamping those transactions, there's actually no globally accepted time in which the transaction occurred, and then there's no way to order the transactions anymore. So to solve that problem, Satoshi kind of brilliantly, because at the time cryptographers thought this idea of a peer-to-peer digital currency was sort of impossible because of this limitation.
Mm.
Satoshi grouped together transactions in blocks and said, okay, like all of the transactions that happened in this latest block, we're just going to call those happening at the same time. And that's how you get this idea of a blockchain. But what he actually had called it, and when I say he, I mean Satoshi, in like a comment in the code that he
Mm.
had written, he called it a time chain. And if you think about the blockchain as like this time chain where these blocks are sort of
Mm.
this sort of
Hmm.
decentralized, like a tick in sort of a clock, right? It's like you can tell time based on and based on the number of blocks on the blockchain. So I found that the way cryptographers explained it to me was really beautiful, and that's why I left it as the first chapter
Mm.
of the book.
Wonderful. So basically, you're starting off with what is Bitcoin and what does the blockchain have to do with it, right? And then you
Hmm.
go on to educate people in the book about what, how to invest or anything like that.
No, I try to stay out of the investment
Mhm.
realm, right? Like I'm more of like a systems thinker, and so the way that I think about it is like people are really familiar with the idea of analytical thinking, and analytical thinking is the idea of taking any system and going into it and analyzing the parts within that
Mhm.
component system. And then synthetic thinking is this idea of going out into the systems that contain it. So every system is both has component parts and is also contained in larger
Mhm.
systems. So half of the book I dedicate to going internal to the system, and I go level by level and I try to get people all the way down to what's called the UTXO. It's the closest technical representation to what a Bitcoin
Mm.
is. So I explain, when you send a Bitcoin, I explain that through using like mechanisms of locking and unlocking, and I explain cryptography with like basic locks. And if people can understand a UTXO, they can basically follow most technical Bitcoin conversations, and that's been true. You know, yeah, I mean, Bitcoin has not changed substantially, so that remains true. And then when I talk in the second half of the book, when I kind of go into the external systems, I think about Bitcoin and its role in the larger economic
Mhm.
system. I think various people have made predictions about how it could be used long term. I talk about basically like what drives the adoption of
Mhm.
Bitcoin, but I try not to make too many direct you know calls into investments, other than I think when I wrote this back in 2017, it was a much different ecosystem. I think now many more people are open-minded about investing in
Mm.
Bitcoin.
Okay, so what is your personal view? Because I'm interested in your personal view because you wrote the book, right?
Sure.
About the future of Bitcoin.
Sure. So I guess what I would start off with there is this idea that originated with the cypherpunks, and had this concept of building the change that they wanted to see in the world, so to
Mm.
speak. So instead of like instead of voting primarily or taking part in existing perhaps corrupt
Mhm.
systems, they felt that they could actually build a system that represented their
Mm.
values a bit
Mhm.
more. So for me personally, I think being young, very ideological, and also just very disillusioned with the way that I saw the direction of money
Mm.
going. I looked at, how money used to be backed by gold, and then, to fund wars, we sort of like removed that
Mhm.
gold standard. And then, money has just been this kind of fugazi since then. And it's, I think it'll be a black swan event when the currency, ceases to be a collective thing that we can
Mhm.
recognize. But it seems sort of obvious to me that that will it's necessary that that will eventually happen. I don't wish for that, but for me, what Bitcoin is an alternative to a system that I view as just totally going down the wrong
Mm.
path.
There's different theories about this. There's people that are all in on Bitcoin, like Michael Saylor, who you know about.
Hmm.
And then there's other people, the gold people, saying, no, you're going to be held with the bag because this is going. It's just so obviously people always, have different attitudes. But from what you see and what's happening, do you think that Bitcoin will be just universally embraced?
I hope that that is the case, and I think there is an opportunity for that. I think the Bitcoiners certainly are making their mark on the world and in politics, and advocating for that to be the case. I am always skeptical, though, that there are always reasons why people want to be able to print
Yes.
money, right? And those reasons are to be able to fund things that the public otherwise wouldn't voluntarily
Hmm.
fund. So at the end of the day, I'm happy that Bitcoin exists. I don't know. I'm not as evangel like I'm not as I don't
Yes.
evangelize it quite as much as Michael Saylor, because I take a much more measured
Yes.
approach, for better or for worse. But I'm just happy. I think it's gone, to be honest, like the view that I've seen inside of like more of the cryptography people close to actually
Hmm.
developing Bitcoin. I think we're all kind of stunned about how fast it's grown.
Amazing.
I think that's a constant shock.
Yeah, because I remember when it first came out, everybody was like, "What is this?" I wish I'd bought a Bitcoin then, but I had no money. And when I remember I had somebody working for me and he said, "You should buy one of these." I said, "I have no money." He
Right.
said,
Yes, I understand that very well.
I was like, "I have no money." I mean, I was a broke, single mom. And I said, "I wish I had, but, I can't really regret because I couldn't have afforded it because I had no money." And he's like, "You really should." And then I kind of forgot about it. And I wish I'd gone back earlier.
Mhm.
But I do invest in Bitcoin. So I have a question. Do you invest in Bitcoin?
Yeah, of course, of course. And to be honest, I don't even think about it as investing, which is like one of the weird mental models of Bitcoiners.
Mm.
We just kind of think about it as like, yeah, of course we have savings in Bitcoin. That seems natural.
Right. Savings. It's like a savings
Yeah, it's
account
much
you
more
would
like
think.
that.
Yeah.
And then, there's different protocols, like because I actually work like in research communication, there's the cypherpunks that are contributing to Bitcoin. They're also building things like digital banks that can operate peer to peer. They're working on extending Bitcoin so that there's more
Oh.
smart contract capabilities. Like right now, Bitcoin
Mhm.
basically only has the ability to send and receive. It's a very basic idea of a smart contract, but we could imagine, 20, 30 years out. That's so far. I shouldn't even say 20, 30 years. Let's say
Yeah,
10.
10. Yes,
Let's say
10.
10 years. Yeah. There's concepts of, holding your digital assets, like, maybe you could have like a trustless stock exchange kind of thing, or a trust minimized stock exchange. I won't use the word trustless to get myself in
Mm.
trouble with the technical people, but there's ways
Yes.
that the blockchain can reduce the third party intermediaries. I think Bitcoin has
Mm.
shown that in the place where it was the most important, which is it kind of replaces the Fed. But there are other places in the world where those third parties could be replaced for the benefit of the consumers of the product. So I'd love to see that. I
Mm.
work towards that daily. And that's what I'm most excited about over the next 10 years.
Right. But Bitcoin is scary in the fact you
Yes.
could just lose it and it's gone in a poof. That's something that scares everybody,
Yes.
and the fact that Coinbase had people go in there and actually empty people's accounts. And they're still here, by the way. Like the Coinbase, I guess that does happen in bank accounts as well every now and then that people can go in and grab your money, but it is scary. The whole where is it? You can't call anybody and say, "Hey, I lost my Bitcoin. I lost my money."
Hmm.
It's gone. If you do a little tiny mistake in the address,
Yeah.
you're done.
So I just recently read this book called The Fourth Turning. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it talks about how
No.
there's sort of phases that the society goes through, and we're in this one phase that's like the most individualistic, least amount of community. And on that point, I was
Wow.
sort of linking it to what I was reading in The Fourth Turning, and I think that there are ways to safely store your Bitcoin that does not require a third party exchange, but would require, um, let's say, another person, right? A trusted third person,
Right.
right? You can create a multi-sig. And if you believe in the premise and the arguments of the fourth turning, we're entering a phase which is going to have much more community than we've previously seen.
Right. So it could be like a bank. It could be like a
Like a
bank
community
where
bank where you actually
right,
trust it.
where you won't lose it because somebody has all of that and they're trusted and they're you know where they like an S that there's somehow can't just run with your money,
Yes,
right?
there's a concept of that people are building called Fediment, which our company sponsors.
Mm,
Yeah, but it would all be done with cryptography and implemented
yes,
peer to peer. But even still, even without that, you can still have a multi-sig wallet where maybe a friend that you trust can have
right,
some stake
yeah,
in being able to move your coins. Uh, so
right.
there are ways, but it's just not what we're used to, right? We're used to
No, we're not used to that. And who would you entrust to go to your bank account and send money? I wouldn't because
because we have no community.
no, but I mean like they could make a mistake and then it's like oops and then they're like, "Oh, you're going to hate me." So it's more about the error that could happen that the other
Yes.
person would feel really bad about it, right? That you know what I mean? Like, right? That, but you don't get that. Well, I'm always stressed out when I'm moving
Oh,
crypto. I'm
very
like,
much
oh,
so.
I better get
Yeah,
that.
there's
Oh,
no remedy
everybody's,
for
and
that.
then it doesn't turn up in the other wallet, and you're like, oh, where is it? And then oh, there it is. It's that whole thing of maybe it just got lost. So you know, that's scary, right? And then the people that talk about their ledgers that they lose and they can never find them, and they lost all their money because it was in the cold
Sure.
storage, and that actually was dangerous because you have to have all these things, and it's just like so much like let's just prepare ourselves to protect our Bitcoin. So regarding the whole banking thing and the digital dollar and all that, this is like so complex. And they say we're going to go digital dollar, and what does that mean? And like they're starting to do that. What is the correlation between the going digital and Bitcoin?
Well, I mean, almost none. They're sort of going in two totally different directions. I think the thought that I was having while you were talking about the natural and almost necessary anxiety that's associated with moving funds
Mm,
is like, you know, it feels like Bitcoin has moved the level of responsibility of money to the level of the individual, which is where it's appropriate.
hmm
And instead
Yes.
of the centralized level at the Federal Reserve, where they don't, or, there's probably several organizations like that across the world, they don't feel that level of responsibility actually, because if they mess up, they just add more zeros.
Right.
But yeah, so to answer your question, like what is the difference? So, in a tradition, in the let's call it legacy banking system, money
hmm
isn't backed by anything, right? There's a book of how much money is where, but in my book,
mm
I sort of lay out the different ways that money is created. I think during almost a different lifetime ago, when the last banking collapse happened, I sort of learned. I think the whole country kind of learned what quantitative easing was. They put these
Right.
fancy
Which
terms on printing money.
it's just it's air.
Yes,
Yes, it's
and now
air.
we're
And also
experiencing.
things like synthetic bonds.
Oh, right,
Air.
just
Right?
exactly. You have to just
More air.
more air, and
Yes.
so, in the legacy trip financial system, the digital dollar is just a way, I believe this, it's just a way to remove the freedom for you to basically have cash. And I think
Mm.
it removes levels of privacy that you have around cash, and it
Mhm.
adds more friction to your ability to make purchases. I think we all saw in Canada. Do you recall this when there was a
Mm.
trucker protest
Yes.
over COVID? And then Canada
Yes.
just froze their accounts, took those people's money, and the more digital your dollar is, the easier it becomes for governments to do that. And that is
Right.
antithetical to what people who are building cryptographic money, programmable money, would want to see. But yeah, I think governments obviously they have an incentive to grow, just like any system,
Mhm.
and they have an
Mhm.
incentive to pull in as much control as they can to get more
Mm.
levers and to create more levers. And by digitizing the dollar, we're just giving them one more lever. So
Oh, I mean, the way it was explained to me and how I understood it is that it's basically one central bank account, like a bunch of little honeycomb like places. And so we're going to have this one big bank account and the government actually owns it. And we've got our little honeycomb in their account. Is that kind of what it is?
yeah, that's a very good one. I picture it as like
Actually, I made that up. I thought of that. I thought so it's like a honeycomb. And somebody said that's actually not dumb, but it kind of is that, isn't it?
the way I would think about it is, when you go into like a mail, what is it, like a mail room or something like that, and like a post office, and you see those boxes in the room, right? But it's
Yes.
in their office. You have the
hmm
ability to pull money out, but they also have a back door to all of it, right? So
Exactly.
like they're
Right.
Yeah, it's exactly like that. The honeycomb, the mailbox, it's
Right.
just like that.
So you'd take this like in a film, you'd take that scene where it pulls back and you see all these little honeycombs and the government's one big bank, right? The thing is, the government can garnish our bank accounts, but it's usually under extremely specific circumstances, like people not paying child support, right?
Mm,
Like when you think about how in which situations, I was thinking, okay, they could go in our bank account. The IRS can certainly dip in and take stuff. They do, right? They do. However, it's very specific. It's not like we can just take it in and just empty your account whenever we want. If it's digital, they can literally just type something in and it will be
Well, I think the key
deleted.
difference is that you can still pull cash out, right? You can still pull cash out, and
Right.
to my grandmother, like, one of the yeah, I mean, because history goes in phases, none of us really, even though these cycles happen frequently, they're sort of far enough
Mm.
apart that people living only
Forget.
see one. So you don't know what to
Yes.
expect, but I recall my grandmother always keeping cash under the bed and in a like,
Mhm,
an envelope
mhm,
because she had experienced
mhm.
bank runs, and bank runs happen for a different reason. I mean, this would be like the worst bank run you could possibly imagine. They were more decentralized bank runs then. You know?
Yeah, no, it was like just your local bank and that was it. But then the funny thing is then they started having the FDIC, it used to be, I remember during in 2000, in the 2008 debacle,
Mhm.
that was when they changed on my local bank. It said, "We are, insured up to $100,000, per account by the FDIC." And I thought, "Yeah, but there's a bank run. You don't have that 100,000 for each of us already. We all know that, right?" But then they changed it to make us feel better to 250,000. I thought,
Mhm.
"Well, still not good because you still don't have the money." But it's marketing
Mhm.
of so people see that, "Oh, well, we're now." It was during the whole debacle they did that. Do you remember that?
I do recall that. I remember the most recent one where it was like, there was one of the banks went belly up in the Silicon Valley Bank and all this stuff, and then
Mhm.
they were like, "Oh, are people gonna get their money back? This affected the startup industry so much because so many people had their money in those banks,"
Yeah.
and it just became a like, "Don't worry about it. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge." Like, there's no formal policy. It's just a like, wink,
No,
wink.
of course
This is
not.
why everyone in the Silicon Valley, if you want to raise money, you just say, "I want to start a bank," and investors love that idea because it's like a no fail business. If you can make it successful, you're always going to get bailed out, is kind of what it seems like.
Wow. Okay, so interesting because I hadn't actually pieced that together. That is the actual opposite of crypto because it's
Certainly.
digital,
Hmm.
but opposite. So that's a very important point there,
Very.
a vital, crucial point. They're trying to have us have less control over our money. This might push a lot of people that weren't pro Bitcoiners into crypto because they are going to be like, no, I don't want that. So there could be real tension with all of this happening.
It's an extreme amount of tension, and I go back to the point about personal responsibility, and for people who are used to, I have same day Amazon deliveries. I have the ability to just
Mhm.
not worry about if there's a fraudulent charge in my account. Like, I'm very
Yes.
detached from the consequences of my money in this
Mm.
sort of fake environment. I call it fake because I believe it
Mhm.
is, but us Bitcoiners, I think we sort of feel like we're saying something that's like really unfortunate and negative, but it's a call to action, and it's a call to take on more
Yes.
responsibility in your life, and to embrace that, because we're basically making a bet against the dollar is what's happening. Right. So
Right,
and
right.
and and no one really wants to be in that position because it's a devastating assessment of the situation. And I
Right, it
certainly
is.
don't want to be right, but it just appears inevitable.
Right, well, you really have to hedge your bets here. You have
Yes.
to, like, have some cash, and so I was thinking the same thing. I thought, "Wait, if they go digital and we do have cash in the bank, what happens?" They said, "Oh, we're gonna exchange it, but are we gonna get the same exchange?" I have a feeling they're gonna devalue all of our dollars when that happens
Yeah, what will happen is that you'll have money in your bank and it just won't be worth,
as much.
exactly.
So the moral of the story is go buy some real estate maybe. You know?
Some real
I
assets.
don't know. I was thinking that. I thought, "Well, what do we do? A little bit of Bitcoin, some real estate," because at least if it's in the real estate, it's in the real estate, and it might go up and down, but at least you own that real estate, right?
I would agree
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah, but I mean, apparently one state's already gone digital. I think they were talking about that in the news.
Interesting.
Okay, so your book really is it for dummies? Can anybody understand your book?
I think my readers are people like experts in their own fields, but not experts in Bitcoin. So absolutely.
Okay, so you need to be a little
Yeah,
smart.
I try not to dumb it down, right? Because Bitcoin for
Right.
dummies, yeah, I think my readers are smart people.
Yeah. No, I see that. It can't be that dumb, but we have to be able to understand basic
Sure.
concepts and non-basic concepts, it sounds like. Okay, so you are all in on Bitcoin, it sounds like. Like you're just like, this is the way to go.
I think so. I think it's a lifestyle choice at this point.
Right. Okay. And of course, I'm not asking for any financial advice because that's not why you were on the podcast. But I am interested in hearing. I want to hear the personal side to the book. Like because some
Sure.
people write a book and then they're not really practicing what they're preaching in their own life.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So you said the personal side of the book. Well, I mean, I guess you run a business podcast. I think for me, business and perhaps writing are almost like spiritual experiences, if I dare say. It's like, when I started writing
Hmm.
that book, I didn't really identify as a writer. I just identified someone who had thoughts, and and I
Hmm.
was quite young. I didn't go to college. I had dropped out. I had ended up working for what I
Hmm.
believed was like the best, coolest Bitcoin company in the space. I was in this very unique moment in time. So, and I had the privilege of working close to these people that other people didn't quite have access to, being the core developers who contribute to Bitcoin. So for me, like going through the years it took me of learning how to code, learning, did I want to get into the market side of Bitcoin? Did I want to just be on the investment side of things, like buying and selling and trading?
Mm.
Ending up in a place where I was working with, some of the leading people in security and cryptography. I think it allowed me to have a unique
Mm.
perspective, and that's what I aim to share in the book. And I guess I would say that's probably the most personal side to it.
Mm. Now, I'm fascinated by Satoshi. How can somebody in this day and age, with all the spyware and everything, how could somebody have been anonymous with this? How is that even possible?
Well, anonymity is a very challenging thing to create for yourself. It's true, but there's a technology called PGP where you can send encrypted emails, and he just kind of used a pseudonym and he kept his IP address private, and it was so early days too. In
Hmm.
the beginning, people weren't looking as closely. And there's even like a
Mm.
policy at the company that we used to have this policy that we wouldn't speculate who Satoshi was, because it's part of the ethos of Bitcoiners to value privacy. And it's one of the
Mm.
things that we think will prevent some of those more totalitarian um, things from happening in our
Hmm.
money, is you have to protect privacy. And of course there are negative consequences to that, and you take the bad with the good. But given the state of the world, I'm very happy that technologies like Bitcoin exist, and that Satoshi was able to pull off his anonymity and remain so to this day.
Right, but you'd think that some with AI and everything, you think they could backtrack and crack the code, and some government, you would think that the American government or somebody would say, "Hey, let's go find out who this guy really is." Like, I know
Yeah.
there's code amongst cryptographers and crypto people, but what about other people that don't care and they just want to find out who is this
Well,
guy?
so I'm part of like a younger generation in the space, but a lot of the older generation, they remember that a legacy of World War II was that there was a no export on cryptography rule, because cryptography played such an important
Mhm.
role in World War II. So as a US
Mm.
citizen, you could not take a laptop with certain cryptographic, implementations through an airport, and you would get searched, you would get harassed. It was a really big deal. And
Mm.
the gentleman who's the CEO at the company Blockstream that I work at, he actually came up with this idea to print some cryptography on a T-shirt so that it
Mm.
couldn't be seized at the border. Right. So, and it ended up going all the
Ah,
way, I believe it went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and ended up being ruled a first part of the First Amendment protection. This ability to speak in
wow.
with cryptography. So there's certainly a lot of baggage around that in the space for sure.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Okay, so thank you for all this. I've learned a lot. So, what's one thing that you would like to leave our listeners with regarding? I know it's fast, but regarding the whole Bitcoin money thing. What's your philosophy on all this or mindset?
Oh, philosophy on mindset. Well, I would have to say is going back to Bitcoin as making you more personally responsible for your money, is I think it is just one step in a suite of things that allow you to take more personal responsibility, right? So, if you're concerned about the economy, if you're concerned about the state of things, I would say Bitcoin is one small step in this idea of taking more personal responsibility. Yeah. That would be my one thing.
That's it. It's a good thing that we have to be so careful because there will
Embrace
be
it.
consequences.
Embrace it.
Yeah,
We try to
embrace it.
take on as much responsibility as we can, like going from taking responsibility of yourself to your family to the broader concept of a community as you
Mm,
can. And if Bitcoin is
mhm.
going to bring more community into your life by requiring that you talk to a friend to help you set up a multi-sig, I think that's overall a really positive thing and a challenge that should be embraced.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, Kiara, this has been amazing. We will have the link to Kiara's website with her book on it if you want to check that out. Can you say the name of the book again, the name of the title?
Of course, it's Bitcoin Clarity.
There you go, Bitcoin Clarity.
You can find that on Amazon and you can find that on my website.
Awesome. Okay, Kiara, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for listening, everybody. Please subscribe, please share the love, and I'll see you on the next one. You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jeanne Amlour, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jeanne Amlour International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact.